Last time, welcome everybody. Hi. Last time I was putting on the chat the name of the people who were attending the meeting, and it's very time consuming and it doesn't let me copy and paste. So I'm just gonna read the names of the attendees so everybody knows who's on the call. Agnieszka, hi. Alexandra Lopez, Carol Burns, Chris Albert, Eric Nix, Eric Schutz, Felice Koplik, Fern Wilensky, Eileen Kahn, Kathy Moore, Laura Fischler, and Laura Monaco. Those are our attendees so far. So welcome everybody. And our
No, there's two more. There's Mike Roney and Philip Greenberg
I
at
didn't
the bottom.
Mike, sorry.
And
I did
Sarah,
not see the
wait, and Robert Gulak and Sarah Soar.
Yep, there you go.
Okay,
We
guys.
got
Thank
you,
you.
Sarah.
Thank you, Joanne.
So let's call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the Radbourne Board of Trustees. And we'll call the meeting to order and we'll begin with a roll call of the trustees who are in attendance. Alba Morales.
Here.
Jeff Krawitz.
Here.
Jane Bedell Elenia.
Here.
Joanne Kerr. Joanne.
Sorry, I'm here. I had to let the dog out of my room.
Arlene Brogan.
Here.
Amy Hummerstone Israelson.
Here.
And I am here, Art Murray, and Tiffany Schindler is not here yet. So there are 7 of us here of the 8 sitting trustees at this meeting. And we'll begin the meeting, as always, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which
it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
and
liberty
with liberty and justice for us.
for all.
Okay, thanks to everyone who is here this evening. This is, as I said, a special meeting. We are, however, going to do one piece of regular business that we do at all of our open board meetings, and that is vote on approving the minutes for the previous meeting. In this case, this November 15th open meeting minutes. They have been posted for several weeks. Anyone who would like to refer to them now, if you're an attendee, you can do so. They're on our website. In the meantime, the trustees have had them to look at as well. So I'll ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes for November 15th, the open board meeting of November 15th. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the minutes of November 15th.
Joanne has made the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Jane has seconded it. And so we have a motion. The meeting minutes, as I say, have been available to the trustees and to the community for several weeks. Anyone who would like to look at them now can do so. Meanwhile, if you are a trustee and have any questions, comments, or suggestions specifically about the November 15 open meeting minutes, please say your piece now. Okay. If there are no comments or questions or suggestions from the trustees, I will now ask any of the attendees who are here to let us know if you would like to make a comment, but that comment is limited at this moment to the minutes for the November 15th open board meeting. If there are no comments from any of the members or questions from any of the members about the minutes for the November 15th meeting, we will now vote on the motion to approve those minutes, and we will begin with Alba.
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Janie?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Arlene?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the minutes are accepted and approved. The first order of business tonight, and the main one, is the discussion about the new architectural guidelines. Our chair is here. That's Amy Israelson. So Amy, I'll go to you now, and you can read it.
Just 1 second. So Mike, thank you for telling me Jacqueline Parash and Michelle Metz joined the call. I copy and pasted and instead it pasted something from my class from this morning, so I apologize to all the members.
Good, because I was
That
like,
was-
what are we talking about?
That was not for you.
Yes,
That was
yeah.
for my students this morning. But like I said, copy and paste doesn't work on Zoom. So I apologize for that. And Amy, no.
Amy, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This evening, we would like to present the proposed guidelines of architectural control. A group of 14 member volunteers have worked on these guidelines for the past 16 months, both in subcommittees tackling specific sections of the guidelines, but also in multiple proofreadings of the drafted guidelines. The goal of the revisions was to clarify and make comprehensive the guidelines while maintaining the historic character of Radbourne. In most cases, that entailed expanding the text and providing examples and photos. Sometimes that entailed simplifying or standardizing the requirements. Sometimes we updated the guidelines by eliminating an outdated item or section or adding an item, for example, electric vehicle charging stations. We tried to include every item we could think of related to the exterior of properties, although sometimes we intentionally left a phrase or requirement as general because that provided the most comprehensible meaning. We made some minor changes to some of the first sections 1 through 6, including streamlining the steps of the application review process, adding electronic submission of applications, and adding a section on property maintenance and deterioration. But the heart of the work was on sections 7 through 9, in which we provided extensive details. We discussed and received feedback about the application process, but decided since the application is a separate form, subject to change independent of the guidelines, that would be addressed in the next project to simplify the application process. Further, we clarified the neighbor consent process and closing process. We also largely kept separate the requirements of Radbourne and of the Borough of Fairlawn, although at times we called out the requirements to comply with both the proposed guidelines of Radbourne and an ordinance of the Borough of Fairlawn. Finally, we worked on sections 10 and 11 by detailing material products and expanding some of the aesthetic requirements of the non-residential buildings. We are finally ready to receive and welcome your questions and comments on the proposed new guidelines from members. We will gather and review your feedback and may incorporate the comments you make into the proposed new guidelines prior to voting on them. Thank you for your consideration of these guidelines. Finally, but very importantly, I would like to thank all of the volunteers who worked so diligently on these proposed new guidelines, both as subcommittee members meeting regularly to review items and sections, and as proofreaders to meticulously review and edit the working draft. I would like to thank Louis DiGeronimo and Eileen Kahn, who on very short notice thoroughly proofread the draft. Former trustee Howard Chamberlain, who headed up one subcommittee with Eric Parrish and 2 others. For my subcommittee members, Jessica Ox, Gilda Linden, and Michael Siegel, who met every week for many months until we depleted our long list of items. Further, Michael was key in formatting the draft. I would also like to thank former trustee Sarah Sir, Nicole Romanek, and Janice Stein, part of Liz's subcommittee. And I would especially like to thank Liz Esterson for her very competent and comprehensive work through the whole project. These volunteers may want to make a statement and/or may be available to answer questions on a specific item on which they may have worked. Finally, I would like to thank the management staff, Janet Sadaka, Anna Kakuro, and Renee Testa Adams, for all their support and after-hours assistance, even on a holiday, in double-checking and posting the draft of the new guidelines. Later, after others talk, I would like to review some of the feedback we already got and are discussing incorporating. First, I would like to turn this to Liz Esterson, who was chair and integral part, and she might want to say something, and then any of the other panelists if they want to make a statement. Liz?
Hi, everyone. Is my sound okay? Janie, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little quiet, but it's clear.
Okay. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who was a part of this, and I wanted to thank Amy for her cooperative work with this over the past 16 months. Even after the subcommittee, we met. We're seeing some funny faces. My sound not okay. Sorry. Okay. I will
It's coming in very sketchy.
I will turn off my camera then. Is that better?
Oh, a little, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify also, like Amy said, a lot of the things that we did were to make sure that the guidelines reflected everything that's come up 20 years later from when they were first drafted. There's so many things that people don't even think of originally. And in the 2 years that Amy and I worked together on the architectural committee, there were decisions we had to make and reviews we needed to do that didn't have clear answers based on the way the guidelines were worded. And so we really had to do a lot of looking at what existed and what didn't exist and what practices did historically. And to make it, the guidelines come to a place that in the future boards will have a more comprehensive and coherent guideline so that there's not this whole, well, we interpret it this way, someone else might interpret it that way, that allows for greater consistency and greater cohesiveness of the architectural approval process.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Liz. Does any other panelists, would you, Sarah or Gilda, or I'm sorry,
Mike Siegel.
Mike Siegel? Anybody else like to say anything? Who else? No? Okay, I think those are the other three panelists who are here. All right, if I could just quickly, in the past a week, 2 weeks, we've received some more review comments. I mean, we were receiving comments from the board and from some of the committee members and the proofreaders, which we've discussed and you know, incorporated some of them. But is it all right if I call out the comments by the sender? I mean, does it matter? Okay, so Eric just sent a very detailed email that we have reviewed. I just highlight the points he discussed, referring to the front of the property. That was vague, but Liz and I did discuss that, and we intentionally left it that way because it really depends on the residents. Each one's so individual. The most formal side, what is considered the front, and that we would leave that to the discretion of the architecture committee when they're dealing with that particular application. Is it the street side? Is it the park side? It depends on a number of factors, and it really needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. This came up, both Eric and Agnes, my neighbor, Dikowska, brought up about a repair. Do you need really such an onerous process to apply for a repair? As Liz said, we're going to keep that we don't want to just let repairs be interpreted so generally that people are extending it to replacing, you know, all your siding. But for something minor, it's a very good point, and we think we can handle that by looking at the application process separate from the guidelines. So that would be the next thing. So we will look into that. Eric mentioned about the height of ground cover versus shrubs, and that in-between section, we felt like the definition of ground cover was generally clear and understandable. There was a discussion about driveways, especially of adjoining properties. We were trying to tackle that problem of a sea of asphalt on some streets where there's houses attached by the garages, and you get just 4 parking spaces or more wide of asphalt. We can discuss the requirement of the neighboring property giving consent to some degree. They already do for roofs and siding. So that's something we can revisit. Finally, Eric brought up the word "shall" used throughout the document, and it was my understanding, we've confirmed by council, that "shall" is a mandatory compliance in land use legal terms. It's not, can consider, may, it's mandatory. So it does have the force of must. And he made 2 suggestions on redefining or expanding the definition for animal hutches and dog runs. We agreed with that and incorporated it, and broadening the definition of holiday decorations to include event and commemoration and seasonal decorations. And we agreed with that and incorporated that. Oh, finally mentioned metal railings are limited to black, brown, or aged bronze. We felt we didn't, whereas we allow white for wood and PVC, but metal is not a historic and traditional material in Radburn, and we're allowing it to be accommodating and, you know, recognizing the times we live in, but we want it to be unobtrusive. So that's why we do not want to allow white. Okay, that was Eric, very detailed. I will be able to speed up a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, he mentioned we expanded a few things. Well, we looked at the definition of outdoor things like fire pits, chimeneas, barbecues, things like that. So we felt that incorporated some other items he brought up. We discussed that. Then Felice Koplik sent us a nice long email, which she summarized great at the end about the use of historically appropriate materials, colors, construction methods, and how important that is in historic Radburn. And Felice suggested applying for a historic grant to hire a historic preservation architect. That might be something we could look into to give us some general ideas of requirements in the future, or maybe for our community building, the Grange or the Radburn Plaza building, maybe something like that. We can discuss that. I think Felice has a more traditional and stricter view of it's my interpretation. I could be wrong. I'm sure they can speak for themselves. But so you can see we get comments on both sides, and we're trying to balance, you know, the needs of the whole community and maintain the historic character. So I think that's everything we've gotten so far, and we will just meet and discuss the feedback we get and incorporate some things into the final document prior to voting.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for all the hard work you and your committees, various subcommittees have done over the past 16 months. I know how hard you've been working on this, so does the rest of the board. And what I want to do now, Amy, you're here, and so are other members of the committees. So what we'll do is allow the members at this point who are in attendance to check in, and if they would like to ask questions about the architectural guidelines now, they can do so. So Alba, if anybody's asking for the floor to ask a question, please let us know.
Yeah, so I have the first comment from Mike Rooney. He says, junky yards, especially for houses that face major parks, seem to be a growing problem. Trampolines, large toys, etc. These aren't technically permanent features and do not appear to exceed 10 feet in height, but they're left out there and are perennial eyesores year round. These can be seen from across the parks and are impacting the overall aesthetic. Can there be any architectural restriction for those? Mike, I had a big trampoline that occupied my whole yard. As soon as the pandemic started, that's what I did. I bought a trampoline. It's gone, but yes, mea culpa.
Liz, could you answer this one?
Yeah, so Amy and I and the rest of the committee, we really talked about this a lot. And Mike, I do understand and sympathize with the perspective and the concern, but really what we came down to is that we are a very family-friendly young family community, and young families are a very large new portion of our contingencies here. And having restrictions on very common and typical things that young families use, especially during the pandemic, but not necessarily limited to it, we felt was being inappropriate for the community that we're in. You know, we're not an adult community. We're not a austere community in that way. Was the general thing we came to at the end of it, and also, how could we limit things that were targeted to young children without then also limiting things like patio furniture and things that adults like to have, just because adults maybe don't find them to be such eyesores. So really for consistency and for being mindful of who our community is and the kinds of people who are moving here, who are living here and are making this a desirable place to be. Plus, even though, you know, these, yes, they're large, they're not the prettiest things in the world. I can see them from my window as well, but they're not permanent. They don't live very long. And it's a pretty small phase of life that these kids use these things for. You know, even the average trampoline doesn't live more than 2 years. And kids grow out of it very quickly. And so while I understand the concern, and it is something that we talked about for weeks and did a lot of surveying of the varying demographics of people within the community. We did feel that having this type restriction, and also I think there are guidelines about how close it can be to property line, just to make sure it's not approaching in as much of a way that is reasonable where we are.
Hey, Liz, I'm going to interrupt here because your audio is not great tonight. And so I know I just saw some of the comments coming in that there were a couple people saying they couldn't quite understand everything you were saying. So I'm going to ask Amy.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Not your fault. Amy, you were listening.
Try dialing in. Try dialing in.
Yeah, if you could
Yeah,
dial.
but when I dialed in, it set me as an attendee, not a panelist. It wasn't a code for the panel.
Amy, do you want to kind of give
I want to add in about truth. We did add a section on deterioration and a section on maintenance that aligns with the borough requirements to be able to, you can have your lawn toys, yard toys out, but they can't be falling apart. I mean, we're going after keeping things maintained, keeping things nice, throwing things out when they're broken and disuse.
Yeah, I think what Mike was targeting was the kind of as Alba said, the trampolines, the pools, that sort of thing that people have. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the big point that swayed me was they're not permanent. And then we had a setback where like 4-foot setbacks became a common thing in the guidelines for us from any property line. So you give your neighbors a little bit of distance and space.
Mike also said, I saw in the chat that something about side yards. Like a lot of people, if they have a side yard,
Right.
they can put it there.
Yeah, but I have a piece of side yard, and again, how do you regulate? You put it on the side and you put it on the back. Like, I think that will be a little complicated to regulate. And I do have a side, but my ginormous trampoline wouldn't fit there.
Right, some people's side yards can't put it.
I think if we try to respect the 4-foot setback, then side yards become problematic because the side yards tend to be quite narrow.
Amy, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, that's much better, Liz.
Okay, so I'm sorry to everyone who couldn't hear me before. I'm on my phone now. Just to reiterate the points that I was saying before is that we really wanted to be friendly and welcoming and understanding of who the demographic is, who's living here and who's moving here. Because these guidelines are not just for what's here now, it's what we expect to see over the next decade. So we're not doing this all over again. So we wanted to be as reasonably accommodating to what's realistic for the younger families who are living here and moving forward without it becoming ridiculous, which is why we did enact the limits we had, the 10-foot maximum and the setback requirement so that someone couldn't get something that was really too large for their yard and the space that they're in. And also just to remind and point out that these things, even though they're there and they may feel like they're permanent, it's really just a phase of a couple years and then they move on and the kids don't play on trampolines anymore. So while we understand this concern, and it was something that we talked about for weeks and did a lot of discussion with varying demographics of the community about this issue, we landed at a place that we felt was a happy medium between not crowding up yards and allowing families to feel like they're not being punished for having kids.
Alba, do you have another question? I know the couple people were looking to ask questions.
Yes, so I have a system. So I look who's raising their hand and I look at the comments in the chat. So just bear with me because you guys might not see what I see. So Bob Kulak had his hand up and I will allow him to talk. And then I have Eileen Can, and then I have a comment from Mike, and then I have Kathy. So just, I have my system, bear with me. I'll get you all the chance to have your say. Bob, you're allowed to speak.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm just chiming in support of something that has actually been touched on by Amy in response, I think, to Eric's comment. I think in general, when we're talking about driveways or siding or anything in which one neighbor could do something that's going to incur a special Radburn-related responsibility on the neighboring property to match it, to look just like it, and so forth, that there ought to be a system that allows people to head off problems before they start, encourage compromise between neighbors before anything formal has happened, so that if you come in and you're saying, I'm changing my driveway, but you forget that that impacts your neighbor, you could be gently reminded to get a slip from your neighbor to say he's agreed to, or she has agreed to this particular change in the driveway, which is going to have an impact. And as Amy was saying, it's the way we handle similar things, and it's the way we should handle anything. I just wanted to speak up for the principle of encouraging neighbors to work these things out in private before anything formal moves along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to, if I could respond to that, Amy, if you don't mind, Nalva, if you don't mind quickly. From the 2 years that I was on the board when this project started and when I was on the architectural committee, it was my experience that whenever we had applications coming in that were for issues that were connected houses, the application, at least 90% of the time, already came in from the two neighbors together. So I think that by the nature of the way these houses are, and everyone knows going into this, that they have to submit an application, they have to have their neighbors' signatures on it. I never saw any situation where someone was applying for something that was a change that impacted their neighbor that wasn't already a cooperative effort. You know, we never had to go back and say, hey, your neighbor is attached to your driveway. Are they also redoing their driveway at the same time as you? I think that a lot of that is very self-evident and inherent in how this works. But we also did have times when we would see, for things that did not impact attached houses, that they didn't have the neighbors that we felt were necessarily the most impacted by this work. And we did say, hey, you need to get this address to sign off on this, or that address to sign off on that. And it did cut off those issues to begin with, and that's why we have neighbors sign and we check the addresses of who's signing to begin with.
Okay, Alba?
Okay, now I'm going to Eileen. Eileen. No.
Thank you. This again is a follow-up to what we're talking about right now. It's nice to think that in a perfect world, neighbors can cooperate and just agree to do driveways or painting or roofs or things at the same time. But I think it needs to be clarified in the event where the adjoining neighbor doesn't have the funds to do the work at the same time, that even though it says that they will agree to do it at a future time, or that Radburn is going to have to make the decision for them, that seems a little vague. And I'm just wondering, does it become a deed restriction if, let's say, you're living in your house and you want to paint your half and the other person's living in the other half and they don't know how long they're going to be there. They decide they don't want to paint it. They maybe even tell you that they're going to paint it and then they leave. So my question is, does this become a deed restriction if they do not comply or complete the agreed upon? And is it in writing that they will agree to do it? I just need to know if I mean, I realize I don't really get in the weeds on this, but we're talking about driveways, roofs, and houses, and people who may not have the money or the funds to do the work at the same time.
Well, I'd like to start just by saying that I know I believe the form in the previous version was like this too, but we tried to make it simpler, that the neighbor who's not doing the work is not required to do the work at this time. It's just when they do the work for a roof, if they agree, you know, if they have to agree to do the roof in the same material, same color. So the idea is it looks like a uniform building. That was in the guidelines.
Yeah, I agree with the ultimate goal, but if they say that they're going to agree, is there a time frame? Do they sign a document stating that? What if they just sell their house before they even do the work?
Well, I think that's something, it's not going to be in the guide. I mean, I'd rather not have it in the guidelines to keep the guidelines separate. That would be like an application process, but it's record keeping by the office. We really started, or the office is really keeping track of tracking all these applications so they can go in and see when, say the person sells, make the new owner aware. And when, if the new owner, I want to pay my house, okay, then, you know, they're notified this was the previous requirement. I mean, like you said, I mean, maybe it's a deed restriction or something declared a closing. I think we're working that out, but the process, the wording is we're trying to streamline, but the arrangement has been like this in the 2 previous guidelines that I have and having lived through here. So we're not changing that. And we're not forcing anybody to do it, but when they do it, they have agreed to match, is basically it.
Okay, I have other questions, but I'll defer to the next question asker. And then Alba, if you don't get any more people, I'd like to follow up with some other questions.
Okay, and just an example, like when I moved to my house, my roof had 5 years, but my neighbor's roof needed to be replaced. So they replaced the roof, and when I do my application, which it will be pretty soon because the 5 years are already up, I will have to match what they have. So it's up to the committee when I submit my application to make sure that it matches my neighbor's roof. Even the homeowner now, me, is different from the person who was there when they changed the roof.
Right, I actually had the same situation as Alba with the roof when we moved in, and we had to do part of our roof and had to match our neighbors because they'd done a different timing.
Yeah.
And the committee at the time 7 years ago said, yes, you can replace your roof, but remember, it's got to match your neighbor.
Okay, let me see.
I think Alba, Mike.
What?
Mike.
No,
Roney? Or
I
Mike's-
think I'm done with Mike.
Okay.
I'm going to read Kathy's question. Kathy Moore, she says, what troubles me is that we don't allow chain link fences to be repaired. Why can't a homeowner fix their fence look for a fraction of the cost of a new one? I feel these restrictions will keep homeowners from making improvements because the cost of them. I bought a house that had the chain link, and while I might or might not care for it aesthetically, to ban me from upgrading, it seems silly.
Liz, I mean, basically, we're trying to phase chain link fences out, so we don't want any encouragement. But Liz, this is, if you wouldn't mind taking this.
Sure. So again, this one is definitively not new. And for those of you who have lived here for a long time, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a very big issue with a house in Radburn who tried to do just that, even though it was very clearly, I think, in the guidelines that you're not allowed to repair, or the ban on chain link fences has been in the guidelines for at least the last 20 years, if not the version of the guidelines before that. We know because there are not 0 of them that at one point they were allowed, but it is not a new concept that they're not allowed there. The reason that we had a long conversation about this as well, Kathy, and we even tried to see, like, was there some midpoint where we said, you know, if it's only one panel or one post, like 10% of the fence being repaired, is it then a repair instead of a replacement? But it just got down to, once you replace it, it's there for like another 50 years. And the goal is to really try and get away from chain link fences in the community, which is why it was removed from being allowed in the last version of the guidelines, if not previous to that. And we did acknowledge the fact that it's in our conversations about this, that it's a very expensive upgrade. We understand taking down a chain link fence and replacing it with an approved fence is not an easy thing. And there are fences that are in the community that are chain link and are in bad condition and are probably a problem. But allowing them to be replaced and then telling somebody else that they can't put one in when really the replacement repair was 90% dead anyway. It was just a very fine line that at the end of this very long conversation about it, Amy and I and the rest of the committee agreed to stay where the previous guidelines had it at not allowing them.
Gilda wanted to respond to that.
As somebody who has a chain link fence, I hate it, but I'm not about to start taking it down because it is a very expensive undertaking. My only concern with the whole thing with chain link fences at this point is there are a number of properties that I see when I walk the parks that have really derelict chain link fences that are actually dangerous. And some of them have just posts and some of them have just gates that are left. So if we're not allowing chain link fences and we're not allowing repair to chain link fences, is there something that the architectural committee can do to get people to take down the stuff that's actually dangerous or just the remnant poles that are left over?
I mean, we added that section on deterioration and maintenance. I don't know, we probably would try to work with the homeowner not to be too hard, arduous financially, but to be concerned about safety and the look of, of things crumbling. So that's a good point, Gilda.
Yeah. To respond to Gilda also, I think that and fences was one of the things that my subcommittee talked about, and Amy again talked about it for a very long time. Part of the goal with that is about getting homeowners to agree within a time frame eventually, but this is part of the process, not just the guideline, which has to be a second stage of it anyway. And then the goal would be, for the association to really assess and take stock of what properties have assets on the property that are in poor condition, either aesthetically or, more importantly, safety-wise, especially like some of these very rusty and not in good shape fences, and try to find ways of working with the homeowners to bring them into compliance, or especially to make sure that then before the home changes hands again, compliance is met.
Yeah, which I think that's the technique that the town uses for sidewalks, that, before somebody gets a CO, they have to do whatever repairs for their property sidewalks. So that's probably a good idea. I have two comments or questions in the Q&A. Eric Schutz says, I would like to express my appreciation for the committee's hard work on this long overdue project. I understand the desire to make changes to attach buildings look uniform. Nevertheless, a provision which allows another member to be forced to make a change for another's choice seems unfair, unless there is an overall plan for a given style of building or for all the buildings on a block.
That's tricky, but I mean, that's part of the ideal situation is the neighbors are coming together, have a discussion, agree on something and coming together. And I actually know a lot of neighbors who are attached who have done that. So that's the ideal situation, but there are limited or not limited, we've expanded a color palette to choose from. The neighbor has to get the other neighbor's consent. They could have a discussion then. I think there's ways to work around this.
And I'd also say, Eric, to remind everybody that these applications, they don't happen in a vacuum. That's why we have a committee who reviews each application very carefully and closely, and usually does site visits to the house to check out and see exactly what's being applied for in the context of where the house is, what it's situated around, what's going on with it. And so if we got an application that said, house A of houses that are attached from top to bottom wanted to do something, and house B really was calling and sending an email and saying, hey, look, I'm not agreeing to this, I'm not on board with this, we would not, or I would imagine, in my experience on the committee, and I imagine future committees would not just approve that in a vacuum. They would look at it holistically and try to work with both homeowners and not just sign off on it and say, sorry, homeowner B, you're just out of luck here.
Right. Thank you.
Laura Monaco, hello, I live in a unit that has 4 attached units. Sometimes it can be difficult to liaise so many neighbors. Might be possible for teams of 2 units to be established based on the design of the unit, so that owners don't have to negotiate with so many people at once when they want to make improvements. This might also ease issues when groups disagree and the association needs to mediate.
I know exactly which house Laura lives in, and yes, it's a group of 4, and they've been working together admirably to get a re-siding project done. That is tricky. Those houses are key in their traditional Radbourne look also. That might be something we can consider at the application and the office side on how to help that process run more smoothly. I mean, I know Anna in the office has worked hard on keeping the applications open simultaneously, but individually, and monitoring all of them and going back and forth. She does a lot of work between the neighbors. So I think we could probably come up with some way to assist that process, make it easier.
And just to put in a little pitch for a moment, we do have a very well working ADR process with trained mediators. So if the homeowners and the architectural committee can't necessarily come to an agreement on their own, we do have a mechanism to help work on that.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, Kathy Moore has a comment and a good one. MNLA says the black fence that we put up in our pool is too modern, so why will we allow them?
Okay, that's, first of all, the fence was put up before MNLA was engaged to do the master plan for the association. And it's a good point. That's one of these questions. MNLA is doing a master plan of historic Radburn. That's like, they're like the landscape version of a historic preservation architect. How strict do you want to get? I mean, I'm not again, you know, this is, like I said, it was done a year or two before MNLA was hired. If we went through it again, we'd probably do things differently. That's the association. Were you just, I think Kathy was just talking about that, right? Not individual property owners?
No, I think she's talking about metal fences, which, you know, like they were not used in 1929.
That's where we're trying to balance people's needs, the historic character. We felt that, no, she's right. And MNLA made that clear. Metal fences were not used then. That's why we said, if, you know, we had this discussion in the architecture committee, because Joanne's on both committees, that dark brown, black, and aged bronze they kind of disappear into the background. They're unobtrusive. Yes, it's a more modern material, but that was a compromise. We thought that was a good compromise, but yeah.
And this is also like an inheritance from the 2003 guidelines, because we had metal fences before, right?
I'm just checking.
Okay, let me see.
Certainly it said chain link fencing in the 2003 guidelines are not allowed. It's silent on metal fences.
I'd also want to add, I'm not familiar with the MNLA document that called them too modern. I don't know specifically what it was based on. But wrought iron.
Yes.
Okay, so wrought iron fences though have been used for almost a millennia. They're not new. They're not a novel concept. They are a pretty, especially at different styles, a pretty key part of Georgian Victorian design aesthetic. And in terms of using new materials in general, you know, if we rule out everything, what is left? I mean, PVC definitely didn't exist in 1929 either as a fence, but it is one of the more common picket fences because of the aesthetic and the maintenance abilities of it for our community. And it's an encouraging style that people often prefer because it is that happy medium in between. So again, I don't know what component of it in regards to the pool MNLA found offensive or problematic.
I think they said that the historic Radburn would have had wood fences, like pickets.
Yes.
Right, it has nothing to do, it's all historic, Liz. It's totally historic.
Okay, but got it. So wooden
And
fence.
the metal
Like
fences,
maybe,
and metal fences, as you note, I wrote a note about against metal fences.
You did.
And my comment, I mean, I didn't want them for that reason. And because of MNLA, because we're going to be using that as a strict guide for all of the parks. So if we're using it there, as we replace things, we're not going to be replacing them with metal fence. We're going to be going by the MNLA master plan, which includes wood.
Yeah, but
So, I mean,
I remember having this discussion with MNLA, and we said that it might be metal, but the looks of it will be more like, because the art fence is very modern, like looking wise, but they said it's not necessarily the material, but you can accomplish a more rustic or older look, even if it's a metal fence that is durable. It will not look as modern and was put on that pool. So they said that like it's not necessarily the material but the looks, which I'm sure when the plan comes in we'll know what they are proposing, but it should look like and with what. But I don't think the material is the main point, it's just the looks of it.
Yeah, I do recall them saying that, you know, when they had the picture of the original wood fence, they kind of had the understanding that we couldn't go back to that. It was literally like a 3 or 4 foot picket wood fence around the pool. And they had that understanding that that's not something that we could do, today.
Okay, Elaine had a question. Is the Deals property part of Radburn? If so, will the new construction need to comply with the non-residential rules?
No, it's not part of Radburn. They sold that. Radburn used to own that. It was a football field. They sold it. They traded it for Daly Field and allowed that development in the early 60s. So no, it will not comply.
Eileen Kanigan, I noticed that construction projects are supposed to be completed in 180 days. Is this the same amount of time that Fairlawn specifies? Why, with supply chain issues, is 180 days too short?
I don't
was gonna-
recall that. Oh, go ahead, Joanne. You go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll answer that because I'm on the architectural committee. We've actually just extended a few people for that reason, because they weren't able to get supplies. So we have like 2 or 3 homeowners that we just extended to the summer specifically for that reason. So it's on a case-by-case basis, and the homeowner reaches out to the office and lets us know and we review it. That's all.
I think it's a good idea to keep it on the books as 180 days and you apply for an extension. It's not a big deal because eventually things will go back to normal. We don't want these endless construction projects.
Eileen again, if a neighbor is asked to sign a form saying that they have been notified that work will be done and they do not want to sign, should they be required to submit their objections in writing?
I think we came this year on the committee, we handled that. I think it was Anna's suggestion. She informs the neighbor to send certified mail and just gives the office the return receipt or the receipt of the certified mail. And that counts instead as notification and starts the clock running also.
But actually there is in the draft in section, I want to give you the exact section, in section 5.2C, it says that the said adjoining neighboring owner, if they've got a problem with the proposed construction, has 7 days after the receipt of the notice to object to any part of the application by notifying the committee to the nature of the objection. So it does specifically say there and give a time frame.
Liz, Amy, if I understood Eileen's question, I think what she's asking is, does the person who refuses to sign then have to explain to some extent in writing exactly what their objection is or why they are not giving permission or whatever?
Right, so in 5.2C, it says if they don't want the work to go forward, they have to contact the board, they have to contact the committee.
And do they then have to explain what exactly is the problem that they are?
I imagine the committee would take it on a situational basis. You know, if you said, hey, committee, I'm not signing, but I'm not telling you why, that probably would not hold a lot of weight with the committee when they were reviewing the application. If you said, hey, committee, I'm not signing, and here's why, those reasons would probably be given due consideration in the deliberation of the application.
So the answer is they.
I also had the experience or that my neighbor just don't want to sign, period. Doesn't want anything to do with the application. And the committee asked me for my other neighbors around me to sign instead because it just wasn't interested in signing. So, and that case is not like they're not necessarily against the project. They just don't want to have anything to do.
I think Eileen wants to speak again. She wants to.
She can, if she wants to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, now all I'm really trying to say is that because everything is spoken and there's a lot of hearsay, and I heard this and she said that, my neighbor didn't sign, and this is why, that it be put in writing. In other words, a lack of an answer is not an answer. And that if you're trying to get someone to comply and it's not the work going forward, if it's not contingent on that, then I can see why you don't really care. But if it's contingent on the fact that they've been reached, even with certified mail and no answer, is there any need or requirement for it to be put in writing? Because someone will say, I don't remember what happened. Well, if you don't have it in writing, you won't know.
Eileen, let me try and quickly sum that answer up on that because we're going around a little bit in circles. I think No, there is no requirement specifically that they have to put it in writing, but if they want their objection to have any particular influence on whether what happens, which is to say other neighbors could sign that they permit it, or the committee, the architectural committee can still give permission. So the fact that a neighbor objects does not stop the project. It just,
That's
but-
good.
Yeah, and this is an acknowledgement of.
Wait, let me finish. There is, as Jeff said, an ADR process. And that's really important. I'm glad he brought that up. Because in a case where there was a severe objection, any homeowner member has access to the ADR process, which puts them into a situation where they could have a mediated hearing with the homeowner with whom they have a difference about this project. And there is a process, at least, for hearing what the objection is and having the homeowner who's impacted by that objection respond. And then there is a way to at least try to work out a mediated agreement between the two homeowners. So that's the best answer, I think, that's out there, which is if in the event that neighbor was insistent that they wanted to stop this project, they would have access to ADR.
Okay, thank you. That explains.
I'm sorry, I just want to add one more thing. I mean, on the application, where the homeowner sign, so if when a homeowner is receiving the application that they could sign for their neighbor or choose not to, it does also say there very clearly that you have 7 days to notify the architecture committee of any objections you have to the project. If you think it would make a big difference, I'm sure we could add notify in writing if you think that that's not clear.
I think it's
Amy,
really good because, you know, if it's not in writing, they might say, listen, your air conditioning unit is within the property limits, but I think it's going to be too loud. Well, okay, so how loud is it and what's the problem? And then the homeowner who wants to do the work is going to say, it was the air conditioning. And then you find out, well, no, it really wasn't the air conditioning. So in writing would be wonderful. I mean, it would just really make it very clear in case you get into an ADR or whatever the situation is. Spoken words are very hard to navigate.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, Eileen. We're trying to keep the process not too onerous, but I think that it's probably a good record-keeping method.
Yeah, for the limited number of times when a homeowner is going to come up with that conflict. Okay, thank you. You can mute me, please.
Alba, Mike Roney has a
Art, I have my system. I'm going in order.
Go.
Kathy has a comment that the chain link is more historic than the Arpel fence style.
It's aesthetically not pleasing, and agreed on by most of the committee, I think.
And she says you have a chance to right or wrong. Okay, now I'm on to Mike Rooney. And by the way, like I'm going in order and I see I have 9 new comments. So just bear with me, I will get to you. Let me see. Mike, you're shooting me straight from Q&A to the chat. So I'm going to the chat right now. It says, over the years, the historic and unique design attribute that the side of house facing a park is the front has been allowed to atrophy by successive architectural committees. Now, a great many houses treat the park side like a backyard. I realize that this horse might already be out of the barn, but was any discussion given to moving toward a revival of this principle? Early on, I heard Amy mention something about front and back being considered on a case-by-case basis.
Liz, do you want to take this, or I mean?
I just have to say
So
that I fight with my husband every other day because when he tells me which one is the back of the house and the front of the house, we always thinking about the opposite way. So
But
I hear you.
can I also say on that one, there's a lot of houses on our park, like my house, where the front is the front facing the street and the back is the backyard.
Absolutely.
You know,
Right. So I think what Amy said before about it being a little bit of a case-by-case basis is valid because, you know, houses on Howard, like my house, the front is the front and the back is not the front. It really seems to vary greatly. And some houses seem to have no front from the way they look, even if they don't have any massive changes that have happened in the last almost 100 years. Especially some of the cul-de-sac houses seem to be very utilitarian on all sides. So that's why for cases of front versus back, where there was a little bit of vagueness there, so we could evaluate each house based on the merits and the reality of the house as it stands now. I also think, and this is more of a personal note, I suppose, that the concept of front yard and the ornamental aspect of a front yard is very bygone notion to a certain extent. And this is maybe just me, but especially in a community where yards and properties are small anyway, having such a designation of the front versus the back is maybe a little bit unnecessary in terms of the grounds itself and not the aesthetic of the home, which I think is what your point is about yards being treated as the backyard. I think you mean is about people putting a barbecue or a picnic table someplace. And again, with that consideration, I think it has to do with what's practical and realistic for a family and a household and kids, etc. If that answers your question.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if you want to clarify or say anything else. I see. Yeah, it is. Okay. Go ahead. Mike, I think you can speak now.
I
Maybe
get
your
what,
mic.
yeah, hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I get what Liz is saying, but you know, we're preserving a historic community here. We're on the National Register of Historic Places precisely because of the planning principles that went into Radburn. So it seems to me that, yeah, I get, you know, doing what's modern, doing what families like to do, all of that stuff. But I think we have a responsibility to preserve the unique historic character of Radburn. And that's really at sort of the crux of my issue with this. So that's just my 2 cents.
But Michael, could I ask you to just elaborate a little bit on what you mean by treating the front like a back? Do you mean in regards to the house, or do you mean how the land is used?
Both architecturally on the house itself, and also how the land is used. Like you said, well, traditionally front yards have been kind of sort of an ornamental aesthetic, to use your words, but again, one of the things that made Radburn very unique was this whole concept of the front of the houses being on the parks. And I understand that on the south side, it's not always that way on some cul-de-sacs, et cetera. But the houses that face the main parks, it's most definitely that way. And it's just sad to see that sort of totally unique characteristic being just fading away.
Well, Mike, I will add, Liz, I just want to say that we didn't distinguish between front and back, limit requirements based on front or back, because, take Randolph Terrace compared to Owen Avenue. It's the exact opposite. But we did, in some cases, restrict park elevations from certain things. I'm trying to remember the specifics. I know, like, certain limit exhaust pipes through the roof on the facing the park. We did some things specifically with the park. We felt it really wasn't fair to do it past street, but park properties kind of had more of an opportunity to keep that side a little formal in some respects, and we tried to do that.
And I also say that I don't think we have, whether we agree with it or not, any jurisdiction to limit what people do on their property. If they're going to sit and have a picnic or play with their toys, I don't think it's a place for the architectural guidelines to say you cannot do that on this side of your property versus the other side of your property, in terms of the land usage being treated more as a front or back.
No, of course not. I mean, it's mainly the aesthetics. When people aren't out there hanging around, it's I realize it's sort of the tide is moving one direction or the other direction, but I just wanted to register that point on the record.
Thank you.
No, I just wanted to say that with Amy's committee, we spent a lot of time discussing, how do we describe park side versus street side, front versus back? And to us, it seemed like park side versus street side made more sense. in some cases because of the physical layout of where that particular residence was. But like my house, I have a street side, but I have a walkway. I don't front back onto a park. I front to the apartments. So that doesn't totally apply, but I know what it means. So we're cognizant of the fact that, this was the town for the murder age. The front was, historic, meant to look towards the park side.
Correct.
Walkway side access being the main way in. Modern living kind of drives driving. So we have to take all of that into account. And I think the guidelines that we put together do take that into account.
I was on the same committee with Michael, and for example, the house that Jeff and I are in, we don't have a front door or a back door. We have two side doors. So how do you define front and back? And the street side of our house is 5 1/4 feet. And that quarter is critical. 5 1/4 feet between the front brick of our house and where the edge of the property line is. So we have no choice but to use the park side of our garden as our living space. So it would be, I don't think we've done anything that would offend anybody. I hope not. We've, met all the architectural guidelines over the years, but when you've only got 5 feet on the street side and you've got 8 feet on either side of the side yards, you really don't have much choice as to what you're going to do. So I think we, as Michael, I think, was pointing out, and as Amy said, we really do have to look at each house as an individual entity based on where it's located and where the doors are and where the street is and how much space there actually is. We can't compare the row houses over in our park to the big houses on Owen Avenue. They're just totally different animals. And Michael, I respect what you're saying, and I think it's important to maintain character, but we do have to look at the practical nature of the differences between the different properties.
Okay, thanks for the feedback.
Thank you, Michael.
I see a last comment from Kathy Moore. I think those of us who have chain link should be grandfathered in for repairs and upgrades like painting. Otherwise, I predict a lot of neglected looking properties.
So I'd love to actually use this as an opportunity to educate everybody about the term grandfathered, if you don't mind, Amy.
No.
I think it's a great thing that we can all learn. That term is actually based on disenfranchising the descendants of slaves. So it's one of my personal campaigns to try and educate people to stop using it and instead use legacy or historical exemption instead. It basically, the term came from after the Civil War. If the rule was that if your grandfather could vote, then you can vote, which is how they got around not allowing poor Black people to vote, but yes, allowing poor white people to vote and not needing it to be like a literacy thing or a money thing as poll taxes. Now I've moved past my personal agenda on that one. Thank you for humoring me. Chain link fences, if we allowed, we really did have a long conversation about this because we did see if we allowed people to repair it, it would be a short-term fix of an immediate problem. But then it would be a long-term problem that would never go away. Because if you repair it now and it lasts forever, and if these properties that have it are allowed to keep it in perpetuity, then they will have it forever, which is problem one. And then you also have problem two of someone saying, well, hey, the chain link fence is a third of the cost of the other fence that I'm allowed to get. How come I'm not allowed to get a chain link fence for my property when my neighbor has it that's brand new? And it really created an issue of consistency, fairness, and allowing this to just happen forever. So I do empathize with people who have the chain link fences and want to repair it, but don't want to spend thousands of dollars. I put a fence in when we moved here. I know how costly and annoying it can be, but that's where we are with chain link fences.
Thanks.
Kathy says, I completely disagree with Liz's argument. Kathy, do you want me to unmute you? Let's see.
Or we can discuss this a little further after this meeting when we meet
Yeah, hey guys, I have nine houses here that have chain link, 4-foot chain link. And no one's gonna want to take down. Can you hear me first of all?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good, because I can't see myself. It's weird. So you're gonna want to think, you said the houses on Owen Avenue are different. The houses on Townley are different. The houses on Plaza Road along Archery Plaza are different as well. And I would love to get rid of my chain link and replace it with another 4-foot fence. And I know that that is not going to happen. But even if I decided to get a 3-foot fence, I probably would want something more historical and with more character. I would maybe get something from a salvage yard of the kind of fencing that somebody would have in the 1930s when my house was built in 1939. But instead, you're forcing this postmodern fencing that my dog can't get through, or perhaps wood. But, in climate change and everything, do we want to go back to wood? Even MNLA said we're probably not going to suggest pure wood, but composite wood. So I think you're pigeonholing us in on at least, like, I haven't even looked at everything else, like roofing and everything else. But I think on materials, you got, and with our units over here on Plaza Road, you need to be more flexible, and it needs to be written into the guidelines that exceptions are going to be made in different pockets and on different properties, because Radburn is so unique that way. So this set of guidelines, I think, is terrific. I know you worked like dogs on it, and I really do commend you all for it, because I know it was a lot of work. But, I feel like you're saying, well, aesthetically, we don't like that kind of fencing. Well, aesthetically, there's kinds of fencing I don't like either. But this isn't about aesthetics necessarily. It's about what's fair and what's right. And, you have to also work with homeowners. And if it behooves everybody to paint or repair part of a fence, and yeah, okay, maybe that area or that fence is going to last another 20 years, but it's better to look at something painted or nice looking, for the next, and historic in its own right, than to look at something that's just going to be unpainted and dents in it and everything else. And I personally think that could affect property values. And in that case, I have to question fiduciary responsibility. Because if you make it too expensive for people to upgrade and repair, they're not going to. And then they're not going to want to move into Radburn because we're so difficult to deal with. So I think the words flexibility and case by case and things like that need to be put in writing into the guidelines. And I think that's all I have to say. And I thank you all again, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Kathy.
Do we have anything?
Yes, I have. Agnieszka had a question about where is the MNLA comments that everybody's referring to, and I just responded to her that they did a presentation for the grounds committee, and we're waiting for the final document that should be in any moment, any day now, right, Joanne? Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, we should be getting it soon, and it will be distributed to the entire community. Eric Mix want to talk. Eric, you are on.
Hello.
Hi.
All right. I guess
Hi.
All right. We got a technical problem with. All right. We got
Yeah, some feedback.
tablet and phones and everything going at the same time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The first property I bought in Radburn, I bought in 1981. At that point, the either written or verbal guidelines suggested or told that chain link fences had to be obscured by plantings, like growing a hedge through it so that the fence was not visible. The chain link fence would not be visible. The plantings would obscure it. So that's just a comment that maybe you could inquire people to plant yews and let them grow through their hedges, those people that are determined to want chain link fence. The other comment, you may have noticed, like Crest Avenue in Ridgewood, where there are $2 million homes. Many of them will have around the front of the homes, and these are traditional front and back, will have black wrought iron fences or black aluminum pseudo wrought iron fences, but they may have around the backyards black chain link fences. So I'm suggesting on the maintenance front, you maybe allow people with chain link fences to paint them black, because they'll be less noticeable, more aesthetic, and probably rust less. So that's just a suggestion I have for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Guys, I just want to quickly note that Tiff is here. Tiffany Schindler's here. I don't know what time you got in, Tiff, but I want to make sure that it's noted in the minutes that you were in attendance at the meeting. So I'm just noting that.
Yes,
I
I'm here.
did.
Thank you, Art. Hi.
Tiff. Go ahead, guys. I'm sorry.
Kathy said that she agrees with Eric Mix.
Anything else?
I think I have cleared the Q&A, the chat, all the hands. So I think we're done.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks very much.
So what we had agreed to do this evening, the board that is, after discussing this by email, was to push the actual vote to approve the new and revised guidelines to next week, a special meeting that will take place next Monday evening, the 13th. That's election night. Election night, the members meeting for election night begins at 7 p.m. next Monday night. At 6:30, we will have yet another special meeting of this board, the 2021 board, at which we will once again address the issue by motion of putting into effect the approval of this board, the 2021 board, the proposed revised architectural guidelines as recommended by our architecture committee. We want to thank Amy again, and Elizabeth, and Gilda, and Mike, and
Sarah.
And Jessica, and everyone. Sarah Sear, hello, Sarah. Everybody who took part in what was 16 months of hard work and difficult work. And I want to point out, just in closing this discussion, that everything that this architectural committee has done, which will hopefully make the guidelines clearer and more precise, nonetheless can be tweaked by future boards. These are not bylaws changes, and that means they do not have to go through the lengthy and by design difficult process of amending bylaws. By the way, that's a good process for amending bylaws. It should be hard. But for this, a future board that is seriously concerned about one or another aspect of the issues that were raised tonight by Kathy, by Mike Roney, by Eric Schutz, and Eileen Kahn, etc. That board is free to readdress the guidelines and make adjustments. That's part of the ongoing situation with architectural guidelines in a community like ours. They are somewhat fluid, unfortunately, over time. But I think this set of revised guidelines, I've gone through them, as have my fellow board members. I think they were extraordinarily well done. I thank all the people on the committees who worked so hard to get them there. And as they move toward greater precision, you'll get greater uniformity, which is in some respects the heart of what the design ideas that started the Radburn community were all about, which is that a sense that there was a cohesiveness to the way things looked. And that's the goal, and it's not easy one to reach. So thank you, Amy, and thanks to the rest of the members of the committee who are here tonight and those who aren't. Okay, so next Monday, 6:30, special meeting. Be there if you'd like to hear us hopefully vote on this set of new guidelines. We now move to a second motion, and this one I'm going to make, and it's in some ways a simple one. So it is a motion to approve a contract with Ives Architectural Studio. That is an architecture firm right here in Radburn. The offices are here in Radburn, and we spoke directly to Joel Ives, who obviously is Ives of Ives Architectural Studio. Mr. Ives is an architect, and I am proposing that we approve a contract to create a plan for renovating the Grange. This contract, which is to create only a plan, is for $47,500, and we would like to vote on it tonight. So let us say I will put that motion forward. I would like to ask for a second.
I'll second.
Alba, open your mouth first.
Okay, so we have a second from Alba, and now we will begin. And again, we will have member discussion of this motion, but first we will have, pardon me 1 second, just 1 second.
Probably Celeste.
And panelists, feel free to leave if you, or whatever you prefer.
Boy, my real life intruded. Pardon me. Anyway, so we have a second for this, and first comments will come from within the board. So if any of the board members would like to speak to this motion, feel free to do so now.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Joanne.
How many architects were interviewed?
We had 5, well, not just architects.
Firms, I mean firms.
Five firms were asked to submit bids. We first did a search for the firms. We identified 5 firms that we were interested in, one of them being the engineering firm which oversaw the sidewalk project, Falcon Engineering. There were a couple of other firms that were either engineering firms or hybrids. And then there were 2 firms that were architectural firms. In all cases, both engineering and architecture are within the purview of the firm. These were all very, very strongly recommended firms. I mean, we knew the work that they had done. We took time to identify them. And then we had first solicited bids, which is to say that they got an RFP and were asked to respond to it and give us a projection or an estimate of what it would cost to prepare a plan for the future of the Grange. And then we interviewed each of representatives from each of those 5 firms over the course of the year. Now, this took a little over a year, actually, but we interviewed 5 different firms after we received their bids and reviewed them. That is to say, the Physical Properties Committee, of which I, Jeff, Amy, Janie, Tiffany, and a non-trustee, Mike Ramirez, who is himself a civil engineer, were a part. So we all, in one group or another, took part in those interviews. Okay, any other comments or questions from the board?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I would request that this motion be tabled until, pardon my voice, but that this motion be tabled until probably the January meeting. And I have 2 reasons for asking for that. Number one, we are moving, this is to move forward with a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project. Virtually all of the architects involved said probably $2 million plus to do this kind of work, depending on the scope, obviously. At this point, we have no work done on how we're going to pay for it. I've been asking for this for several months, and it has not been acted on. We have nothing more than we'll probably take some money from the UBS funds, probably take some money from this, probably take some money from that, maybe get a mortgage. I don't think it's prudent to move ahead with a project like this without at least having a blueprint from a financial professional that tells us how we can afford to do this, because certainly the amount of money that we can spend has a direct, huge impact on the scope of the project and what we can do. So in that context, I think it's too soon to do it. Secondly, there are 8 people on the board that will be voting on this. For 4 of them, their terms are up in about another 6 days. For something that is the beginning of a multi-year project, I think it should be done, reviewed, and voted on by the new board, not by the current board. So for those 2 reasons, I request that this be tabled, picked up by the new board, and I would have the complete support to move forward with it, or at least talk about it for the January voting meeting.
Thank you, Jeff. As chair of the Physical Properties Committee, I would like to respond to Jeff's suggestion that we table, and then we will see if there is a second for tabling this motion. So here are my thoughts on what Jeff said, and I understand Jeff's point. I have several different and views on this. One, all of the work done in soliciting bids, identifying firms, and interviewing them was done by this year's board. Those people who will be elected to the board will have absolutely no familiarity with any of these firms, with the interview process we did. They would be, if I were a new trustee and were elected to the board next week and were handed this, my immediate reaction would be, okay, I have to talk to these firms again. I have to do my due diligence. This particular board has already done all of that. Second, I think it would not only be a good idea for this board to vote on this tonight and approve it, I think it's essential. The work that has to be done in actually creating, not only creating a plan, but implementing it will take time, even with a vote to approve this contract tonight, which is a vote to approve a plan to fix a building that is so far past its due date that it is spoiled milk that is high as a kite, and you need to do something about it now. It is safe, it is inaccessible to large numbers of people in this community. We talk all the time about care of people who are elderly in this community. Well, if they have any mobility issues at all, they essentially can't use the Grange, and they're paying their assessments like everyone else, and consideration of them is essential. This $47,500 is a tiny investment in beginning the process and work of seriously addressing, not as a talking point, not as a pie in the sky possible project at some point, but seriously addressing what needs to be done. And I'm convinced, as someone who talked to all of these firms, that Ives Architectural has the right makeup. They know this town well. They know this building well. They know Radburn extremely well. They also understand all of the different aspects of starting, and that's all this contract will do. Start the process of creating a real plan to renovate, replace, or refurbish the Grange. They will create contrasting plans, one of which will assess what it would be like if we chose to go piece by piece and fix everything that was wrong in the Grange, cost that out. They will then simultaneously create a plan that would be more flexible than that. It would require a lot more redesign. By the way, that's why you have an architectural firm head this up. Over the course of the year, one of the things that became clear to me as a trustee was that you wanted an architectural firm to head this kind of project, because this project is going to involve a lot of redesign. It is going to involve a lot of aesthetic work, as well as a lot of engineering. So I think Ives is more than well suited to do both of those things. If we approve this contract tonight, if we do not table this motion, but choose as a group to vote on this, it will be knowing that this $47,500 contract is a predicate. Next year's board, should it choose to seriously engage the project of renovating the Grange, will have tons to do. Many of the most important decisions will not be touched by this particular part of the project. This will begin it. But it will give us access to someone with a ton of experience, both in Fairlawn, in architectural design, and in historical architectural design, someone who knows this territory, who can guide us. Last, the overall work that will be done planning this will be guided by Joel Ives, and I'm convinced Mr. Ives is the right person to help us as a community come together and do a lot of the hard work of choosing what kind of range we're going to want. We'll need leadership from that, not just from the boards, and next year's board will have a major part to play in that. This vote won't change that at all. But it will also mean that a professional is there who's done this, who knows how to speak to us as a community, who can anticipate what some of our concerns as a community will be, who can address those concerns in a serious way, but also as a professional, who can help you understand limits, who can help you understand precisely the issue you raised, Jeff, which is cost. In order to understand what this is going to cost, we need to have a plan to present first and foremost, and to work forward with in terms of creating a plan to pay for it. And there is no simple way this is going to get paid for, not if the work is going to be as extensive as I think it must be. So that's why I think bringing Joel Ives in will help us and the next year's board and board after that to make all kinds of decisions with the community's input and involvement that will hopefully arrive at a place where we can finance properly what will be an extensive, the biggest project I think Radburn's faced in a long time. This is what to do about a 109-year-old building that is a fire trap and a money pit. And by the way, just one last point, we've been fixing this building because we had to, because it's in that sorry shape, that we've had to do certain things and put money into things like boilers, patching the roof, and a ton of other things. We've got a floor in the gym that needs to be worked on. There's a ton of different things that need to be done. And in order to do some of them, I think you really need a plan, comprehensive plan to do all of them so that you get a building that's accessible. Go ahead, Amy.
I just want to, I was going to say something, but I think Felice in the chat said it more eloquently than I could. She said, this contract is for a project assessment report and schematic redesign. This is to determine the background data and then determine what might be feasible for the range. These are not final drawings. They're not drawings at all. I mean, not, you know, other than the existing condition study, concept design, maybe, but it's an assessment really, and it comes with a cost estimate. So, you know, do you get the money set up first, or do you find out how much it is in rough numbers first? I think it's just as feasible to go this way first. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
So
Art, yeah, go ahead.
In response to what you said, I agree with most of your comments. Certainly, I agree with everything about the Grange is in desperate need of work. My only issue is if you're going out to buy a house, the first thing you do is you talk to a finance person, you talk to a bank to find out what you can afford. That gives you a scope on what you're looking for. Can we afford a $1 million project? Can we afford a $15 million project? I'm just throwing numbers out, obviously. I believe we need to have some kind of a scope, some kind of a handle on that first. It's December 7th, whatever today's date is. Not a hell of a lot's going to happen over the next 3 or 4 weeks over the holidays. So realistically, by waiting to vote on it in January, we lose virtually no time at all. We just do things in a more fiduciary, responsible way. That's my preference.
Gotcha. And I understand. Absolutely, I take your point. The only thing I would add to it is, in this case, we're not building a house. We're taking a house that exists and deciding what to change in it. And it's going to be extensive changes. And in that case, a lot of times what you do is bring in an architect and talk to them first. And then when you figured out what you want to do with the house, you figure out what that will cost you and whether you can afford it. So let us assume that Mr. Ives came in, gave us a plan, we costed it out, and then we had to make adjustments. That interaction with him, with boards to come, and with the community is absolutely essential to making this project come to what I hope will be fruition, which is real change rather than discussion of it. But again, I got you. Go ahead.
I just want to say that we have done this kind of assessment for all our infrastructure. So we went and hired a reserve study to see what elements of our physical components needed to be not updated, but needed to be fixed for the next 30 years. In that reserve study, mind you, we hired our engineering firm to do a reserve study, not knowing what the cost of those replacements were going to be. But we had an idea, thanks to that reserve study, of how much replacing all the physical exterior components visible to the eye are for the different areas of the association, the common areas. And that's how we knew that for the Grange, for example, for 2020, we needed to replace at least $350,000 worth of components that we didn't do. And there was more to be done in the 2021 and 2022. So we are already behind the game. And we have had to incur in repairs here and there since then, because the boiler broke, because the roof is leaking. So in my opinion, this should be head-on, timely manner done. We also did the assessment of MNLA for our grounds, and they're giving us a plan with estimates for the projects that need to be done. Again, we didn't have a plan then when we hired MNLA for the plan that they're putting forward of how we're going to pay for those different projects. Because once we have those numbers, we can figure out, can we apply for grants? Can we fix, can we use the UBS money? Can we sweep? What kind of modalities can we use to fund those projects? And those are going to be decisions that future boards make, because these projects are multi-year projects. We also spoke with our financial advisor, who is aware and has been aware that the Grange project is in our horizon, and he's already thinking ahead of how to get us there. We also have Taylor Management, who has experience acquiring loans for these type of projects. So in my opinion, we should vote today, and we should move forward with a plan that will allow us to tackle this, and hopefully we can have a place where we have sprinklers, we have access to all the people with disabilities, to our elders, to people with mobility issues, that we could have a bathroom in every floor and have a space for the community that is not deteriorated and in bad condition. Thank you.
Okay, do any other board members have any comments, questions, suggestions they would like to make about Jeff's proposal to table this motion? Okay, so my understanding of this is that we need, if in the event that the proposal is made to table the motion, before we can vote on that motion to table the motion, we need a second. Does any board member want to second Jeff's motion to table the motion for the contract with Ives Architectural? Okay.
I'll second it.
Sorry, Jeff.
That's it. No, absolutely fine. And
we live in a democracy, God willing, and we do what the majority says.
This is honestly, I think this discussion is an absolutely very healthy one for the board and for the members who are in attendance, and will be for anybody who watches this. It's a very good conversation for us to have had. Anyway, we have the motion on the before the board now. It is to approve a contract with Ives Architectural. The board had a discussion about it. Now we want to go to the members. If there are members here who would like to talk about this particular motion, that's all we're talking about now, please let us know now. I know Bob Gulek, I think, wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, Bob, you're on.
Great. You can all hear me? Thank you.
Yep.
Very briefly, obviously, I began noting and asking for action on the Grange 20 years ago. I would hate to spend the next 20 years, complaining about it. We do want to move forward. However, this is the comment I wish to make. the contract involves having Ives look through various ways in which the property could be used, various purposes. I'd like to go into this with the understanding that this is the beginning. I'd like to have on the record, the beginning of the broadest and most open possible conversation with the entire Radburn community as to the purposes that this new or newly renovated Grange will serve. Obviously, it would be a shame if Ives interpreted the contract as being what are the 4 emergencies that need to be solved now and how do you solve them the cheapest, in order to keep the purposes exactly as they are now, but fulfilled in a better way. I would hope that this contract will be a doorway into a broad and open conversation with the whole Radburn community as to what we can do with the Grange property and what we choose to do with it. That's all I wanted to say.
Janie.
And I just say I think that's exactly what our thoughts are to get this moving forward. We're not making any of those final decisions. We've just done the legwork of who we think will be the right person to have that discussion with the community. And we did bring that up with Joel Ives when we talked to him about discussing it with the community. And he's all for that. So he would be involved in discussing with the community. So that is something we talked about.
Yeah, and I would like also to mention that when we hired MNLA, we did exactly the same thing. The community was involved. We sent a survey. We brought up, and people had great comments about what was in their minds about landscaping and grading and areas of problems. Yeah, the community was involved then, and the community will be involved now.
But it will be up to the next board to follow up on that. That's
exactly. And we are done.
What our goal is with this. But the next.
Okay. Yeah, no, Bob, your point is well taken, and it's exactly what we have in mind. And one of the reasons I thought, as one of the people who interviewed him, that Joel Ives is particularly well suited to this was because I think he had a very, very firm grasp of exactly what Radburn is as a community, how important this project is, and how much communicating with the community is going to be an essential part of getting support for what will be a huge, huge, and hugely expensive project. So yeah, that is going to be impossible without a sustained effort to get the community in back of whatever is proposed. And I think Mr. Ives is extremely well aware of that. One of the reasons I thought he was an excellent candidate. Okay, do we have any other member comments or questions, suggestions about this motion?
Hold on, Art, I'm going through the chat.
Yep.
Okay, one of the questions, Aline said, I agree with Jeff. It is still important to have a financial setup. Gilda said, is there any plan to find out what the community wants in terms of types of use for the building before having plans drawn up? I think we answered those questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to that one point about cost. Again, there are 2 central issues. What kind of building and what do you want? And what's possible, what's feasible, and what's it going to cost? So those are absolutely, those are the 2 big issues.
Felice said the contract is for project assessment and report and schematic redesign. This is to determine the background data. So Amy already referred to that. Gilda said, wasn't there an assessment done by the firm that worked on the sidewalk plans? And Gilda, like I said, there is not a special assessment done to the Grange as a whole, just to the exterior parts of the Grange. So anything that was visible. So for example, all the electric that was not assessed, all the plumbing that was not assessed. So it's only the reserve study only gives you roofing, the heaters, the lighting, like all the superficial stuff, but not anything. For example, any damages caused by rain underground to the foundation, that we don't have any idea. So all the stuff inside the building we don't have assessment for that.
Alba, let me interrupt. Joel Ringer, I took your point. So Mr. Ringer, who has a background and knows parliamentary procedure, suggested that for efficiency in the meeting, we should have asked for a second on the tabling right from the beginning before the discussion ensued. Joel, but the discussion would have happened anyway, and I'm glad it did. I think it was healthy, and I thank Jeff for bringing the point up because it's a reasonable point. And I think that I learned from the discussion as every time we have one about this subject. So go ahead, Alba.
Felice mentioned that the Eaves architectural firm restored the Plaza building and did an excellent job.
Right.
Eric Schutz said, will it make sense to apply for a historic grant for the Grange design project?
Yeah, go ahead.
That is an interesting question, and the Grange has been renovated before, so the historic character I don't think is that historic anymore. But that is one of the things that we will look into.
Here's the contrast I would make, Eric. One, we're pursuing right now grants for the tunnel. We got a grant from MNLA for our landscape. We got it from New Jersey State Historical Society, but the grant was for MNLA to do its work on the landscape, creating a plan for the landscape. The problem with the Grange is that it is 109 years old. It was not part of the original Radburn. It pre-existed the original Radburn. It was repurposed for Radburn latterly. And it is in itself, and if you've been inside it, you know that there's no particular historical character to it, unfortunately. The facade has perhaps notionally some historical value, and this is something Mr. Ives could explore, and if he has a background experience in this. By the way, Janet Sadaka, who has gotten us grants and has us in the process of getting others, has been all over this, and we've tried to use grants where we could to save money. The MNLA design was provided through a grant. So where we can, we will. But I'm afraid when it comes to the Grange, that building as a historical site, it's not designated one. And as I say, it's not original Radburn per se. It was essentially added to Radburn after Radburn was built, but it existed prior to that for years. So that's why we haven't pursued that more than up to here. But as I say, ongoing, Mr. Ives thinks there's ways we can get some historical grants for this. We will absolutely pursue that.
Eric, I'm allowing you to talk.
Go ahead, Eric.
Hi. I'm glad to hear people say negating the word historic in conjunction with the Grange, because nothing historic happened in that building. There are about over 500 Grange halls, all practically the same architectural style. If you want to go look at another Grange hall that has been altered less than the one on Fairlawn Avenue, I advise you to go look at the Paramus Grange Hall, which is a half a mile south on Spring Valley Road, a half a mile south of Route 4. There you will see a much more original Grange Hall style. Grange halls were built all over this country as an agricultural husbandry, was called at the time, for the farmers. All over this country. There are over 500 of them still standing. So there's nothing particularly unique or historic about the building. Any thought of calling it historic is a misnomer. So my question is, why are we locked into restoring this building? Has a consideration been given to demolishing the building, starting modern construction without any kind with modern infrastructure, modern utilities, modern foundation opposed to fieldstone? So why are we locked into restoring, upgrading the Grange Hall, why not we build a new building in a Georgian style that would look like Radburn? And, well, I would be my suggestion to the board, rather than being locked into somehow fixing this old building.
Thanks, Eric. You know, we did discuss, we've had preliminary discussions. Jeff, Tiffany, Amy, Janie, Eric, Mark and I, as part of the Physical Properties Committee, have lightly touched on that subject. And there's no knowing what is the best, most practical, and most affordable way, and the way that will make most people in Radburn happiest in redesigning this building. So if down the line the proposal was made for a completely new building, we have to look at that. It won't be this board that does that. So all of this kind of discussion, you can't have that, in my opinion, until you've engaged an architect and had that architect begin doing her work or his work to create a plan, and then you begin the interaction with the community. And you talk very specifically about money, what the Grange is going to be used for, and you move forward.
Then, or am I locked?
Eric, and I think part of the discussion exactly and precisely what this contract will do is to give us a sense of, okay, how much is to repair and how much is just to start from scratch. And we have had that conversation multiple times.
Yep.
So the firm will consider the cost of demolishing and a new construction simultaneously considering rehabilitation.
Sure. I mean, the next board and the board following that, in all probability, will have the responsibility, the task of examining options, and I'm sure everything's on the table. You have to find out what people in the community want. You have to decide what you can afford to do, and then you work together to make whatever you come up with as a plan come to fruition, so that you have a building you can really use instead of what we've got now, which is a building you're triaging all the time. Okay, anybody else got a comment or question?
Janie, did you want to say something, or Amy?
No, I think Art basically said it. I mean, Eric, that's what we're hiring Dolan for, is to figure out, you know, exactly, did we demolish it? Can we do repairs, which he doesn't really think that we can? Or, you know, can we keep a facade? Like, what are the different options, and present those options to the community?
I'll tell you what for me is a bottom line, and this, I think the whole community, I would assume, would agree with this. Whatever we come up with, every single person in the community, regardless of their mobility status, will be able to get in and out of it and up and down through it. If they need a wheelchair to do that, then they will be able to have a wheelchair accessibility. So if that means that you need a new building, so be it. I don't know, but I do know that to redo this building extensively, to spend a ton of money on it and wind up with a building where you're saying to somebody elderly who can't get upstairs, or somebody who has other physical challenges that make moving around difficult, well, this building's not for you. That, to me, is utterly unthinkable.
But Art, you can't do that. I mean, you can't do that just by code. You're not allowed to do that. It's not even a code issue. It's a law issue. It's ADA. But as you know, as Felice said, I mean, this building, Eric, I would just argue that it's historic. I mean, I guess because it represents a certain time period. It's 112 years old, but it's not landmark, and it's debated. I think these grants depend on how significant its meaning, its history is. It's part in the fabric of the community. I mean, in the broader community too, not just Radburn. So, you know, that's what historic preservation commissions argue about and process and deal with all the time. So, as Felice said, it might be eligible for a grant. I mean, that might not be the best way to go. This is all open for discussion.
Yeah, there are lots of different, right. There are limitations that come with getting a grant too, because the whole point of a grant, the sort of grant we're talking about, is to perpetuate a certain historical idea. And once you begin going down that road with the Grange, you have to be careful, because what ideas would be considered historically important? And are they ideas that are in conflict with what we want out of that building? So we will, this is a discussion on how this vote goes that we're going to be having for a long time. Go ahead.
All right, it's Tiffany.
Hi, Tiff.
Hi. I just wanted to be noted that in our choice of this architect, he is also looking into whatever grants may be available. So it is a full scope of work that we are looking to approve. It's not just, here's what we do with this. This is what I think should happen with this. We're going with someone who's knowledgeable of the community and of potential landmark status or potential grant status. So everything will be considered.
Okay, do we have any more, thanks, Tiffany. Do we have any more questions or comments from the members?
It's Arlene. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi, Eileen.
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to state that, financially, I think we've done our due diligence on this, and I think we've done so much work that we leave it in great shape for the next board. I mean, Alba for years, with Joanne worked on it. I worked on it this year. We've built the foundation for the next board to go on with sweeping the gains and the dues, the assessments. I think there's a big puzzle and the next board just has to put the next piece in, but to start all over again would just be wasting everybody's time. So that's why I am in agreement to vote with it tonight.
Thanks, Arlene. Anybody else in the members want to say something? Or
One comment from Mike Rooney. The building isn't even the original Grange, so it is architecturally and historically insignificant.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, that's kind of the point. You made it more succinctly than I did, but that's the point I was trying to make earlier. Thank you.
But yeah, it could be eligible for grants. But again, this will let us explore.
Again, Amy and Joanne, but mostly Janet Sadaka, have been heavily involved in trying to find grants and have been successful. Thanks to Margaret Newman, by the way, the grant writer who was so helpful to us. And I always think of her in this regard. But the question of how much money you get for a grant has to be weighed against what you want to do with the building. And again, that is an ongoing discussion. We don't have to really have it at length tonight. Because you're going to be having it in the next year with next year's board. You're going to be having it conceivably, some of it after that. So we'll see.
Art, can we move on? Because we still have our own meeting tonight.
I'm ready. Yes.
Thank you.
As long as there's no more comments.
No more comments.
Okay, then let's put this to a vote. I have made a motion to approve a contract with Ives Architectural Studio to create a plan for renovating the Grange. The contract is in the amount of $47,500. The second was from Janie. And was that right? Was it Janie who seconded the motion? Was it you?
I did.
Alba, I'm
Alba.
sorry. So the second was from Alba. And we will now put this to a vote. So we will begin with Alba.
Yes.
Jeff?
Against my business principles and how things should be done. I'm not an obstructionist. This is the right way to move forward. I will vote yes.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that.
No.
Jane?
Yes.
And Amy?
Yes.
Tiffany? Tiffany? Can Tiffany hear us? Tiffany?
I'm here. Sorry, everybody's frozen for a minute.
Thanks, Tiff. Arlene?
I vote yes.
Yeah. Arlene? Arlene?
Oh, yes, I vote yes.
And Joanne?
Yes.
Okay, so our vote is 8 in favor, and the motion to approve the contract passes. Finally, we have another motion tonight, and I asked Alba to make this one, and then we will have discussion and a vote, I hope. Go ahead, Alba.
What am I doing?
The motion to approve a contract with Todd. You want me to make it? I'll read it to you, Alba. This is a motion to approve a contract with Todd Harris Company, Inc. for the installation of a new slide for the art.
Oh, yes. That was all last month, Art.
Yes. The contract is in the amount of $45,848.75. So, Alba, do you want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
I will second it. And let's put it to the board now for discussion. Does anyone on the board want to talk about this proposal for a contract to put a new slide in at our pool?
No, I can't wait.
Anybody else? How about the members? Is there any members who would like to talk about this motion to put a new slide in for the R pool? I should specify that this will replace the diving board there, and the bottom of our pool is not at a sufficient depth to meet the current state requirements for a diving board. So we are replacing that diving board, A, as a safety and liability issue, B, because we think a slide would be wonderful at this pool. Anyway, that's the reasoning. So any other comments from the members? Okay, there being none, then Alba, we will put your motion to a vote. And let's start with, I will start by voting yes. Alba?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Tiffany?
Absolutely, yes.
And Arlene?
I want a slide, please. Yes, that was my son. Yes, I want to, yes.
Okay, so we have 8 votes yes, and the motion to put a new ladder in, a new slide in at our pool has passed. And it was a long meeting. I thank all the members who attended. I thank everyone who commented this evening from the board and from the membership. I thought it was an excellent meeting on 3 important motions. So thank you all. Mike, good night to you. Good night to everybody else. I will take
Make a motion to close the
Joanne.
meeting.
adjourn.
I
Yes.
make a motion to adjourn.
And I will second Joanne's motion, and let's go around. So we'll start with Jeff,
Yes.
Alba,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Tiffany,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
and Janie.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passes 8-0, and we are in adjournment. Thanks all. Thank you all for being at this meeting, and we'll see you next week at 6:30, I hope, and for the members meeting at 7. Good night.